Hi, this is Teresa from Phoenix Gate Crafts, and I recently learned something about myself and ballet that I figured out through my crafting. So, a little bit of backstory is kind of necessary for any of this to make sense. So, I started ballet when I was 4 years old. I watched the Nutcracker that was on PBS. My mom had recorded it onto a VHS. Yeah, I am not too surprising. I'm that old, I don't think. But my mom insists that she came up with the idea of getting me dance lessons, but the way I remember watching it, and I think it's the Mikhail Baryshnikov version. They wound up making cookies at the beginning of the movie. And I remember watching probably the pas de deux, and the girl was beautiful in her pointe shoes. And I remember turning to my mom and pointing at the TV and saying, I want to do that. I want to wear those shoes. And she said, you want to do ballet? And I said, yeah. And that might be where she got the idea that maybe she should sign me up for some lessons. I was so disappointed that I didn't get to wear pointe shoes right away. And it makes sense because, what I didn't understand when I was 4 is that as you grow, your feet and your bones are still developing. You need to be at least 10 before you get into pointe shoes, ideally closer to 11 or 12, because your bones are still developing and they're still hardening, and you don't want to cause your feet to grow deformed. You want them to grow and be strong, and you don't want to cause yourself permanent damage. And I think I was a little bit young to start in pointe shoes because I got the letter inviting me on to pointe on my 10th birthday, and I believe I started a couple months later in January once I was able to actually get fitted for a pair of pointe shoes. And the first lesson in pointe shoes is very unimpressive. I mean, you're rolling up on your toes, then you're rolling down, and then you're rolling up, and then you're rolling down, and then you're allowed to plie and spring up and into a sous-sus. Very exciting when you get to do that, and you get to go, and your toes have to line up perfectly. And then you walk around the bar, holding on to it for dear life. And, you're only on pointe shoes for 10 minutes. I mean, you also spent a good 10 or 15 minutes figuring out how to put the dang things on. But you wind up just doing a little bit, and you start building up the extra strength in your feet. So that way, eventually you start doing things, after a few months, you're starting to do a few things away from the bar, and then you're building up more and more strength, more confidence, more familiarity with being on pointe. And you're really building up strength and confidence that all the skills you have when you're in flat shoes, so the soft ballet slippers that everybody starts off wearing, you're eventually able to apply those skills to being in your pointe shoes. The problem is I never really got good at pointe shoes. I'd been in pointe for 2 years. I was 12 years old, and I auditioned at the Sacramento Ballet for one of the snowflake parts, so one of the adult dancer parts. And at that point, 2 years on pointe, I had never done a double pirouette turn. I was still just doing passes, which is when your foot comes up to your knee and then comes down the other way, and you're not turning. So I felt very proud of myself when we were supposed to be doing double turns. I was very proud of myself that I was doing single turns, but I was very behind where I felt I should have been at that point in how much time I'd spent on pointe. And the truth of the matter is, I mean, I did soon after figure out how to do turns and then some double turns, but I never felt good in my pointe shoes. They never felt right. And it being the reason I got into ballet, pointe shoes was why I was dancing. And I always had this feeling in my heart that pointe shoes were what I was supposed to be doing. And it never felt right. I never got good at it. And when I went away to college when I was 20 and quit for 3 years, when I came back, I didn't even bother with pointe shoes. I just was doing soft shoes for the next several years until I quit when I was 28. And that was 6 years ago. So what's this got to do with knitting or crochet? That feeling in my heart that I should have been doing that is the same feeling I got for crochet and then later knitting. I knew I could do it. I watched somebody whose daughter was in the class before mine. She was waiting in the waiting room for her daughter to get out of the class. And I saw her crocheting when I was about 16, 17 years old. And I watched her for a while, and then I asked her about it, and she showed me how to crochet. I wound up going to Joann Fabrics, getting a ball of yarn and a hook, kind of randomly. And I brought them the next time. She showed me how to get started. And I did basically 2 stitches for the next about 14 years. No big deal. So I just picked it up that fast. And when I found Jada in Stitches and the zigzag blanket, I picked it up that fast. I started watching other YouTube video tutorials. I was making flowers and headbands and table runners and shawls and this and that and the other thing. I got to the point where I could literally make anything I wanted, including the Moogly cowl, which, by the way, is a very good skill builder. Like that, no big deal. And I picked it up very quickly. I mean, seriously, within 6 months, I was probably at least intermediate, if not intermediate to advanced levels. Though I'm going to make another video about why I don't believe in those levels and why you should never let an official pattern level deter you from doing something you want to do. But I knew in my heart that that was something that I could do, and I did it. Doesn't mean it was easy all the time, but it was a challenge. It was never hard. Pointe shoes were always hard for me. They were never comfortable. So we have toe pads that we stick in our pointe shoes. And at one point I tripled up on my toe pads. I had 2 ouch pouches and the crappy little lamb's wool pads that you get with your first pair, all shoved around my feet. It was very squished when I was standing on the flats of my feet, but when I was in toe shoes, it was the only thing that gave me the comfort and support I needed to actually be up on my toes. And it never felt right. It never felt like I was the right distance away from the floor, and it never felt... Pointe is not comfortable, and it's not meant to be comfortable, but it never felt the way that it was supposed to feel in my head. And knitting was very similar feeling to that, because when I started knitting, I had the wrong tools and the wrong yarn, and I was knitting English style. What I needed to knit continental. I needed metal circular needles, and I needed a wool-based yarn. Once I got those 3 things together, knitting was just so easy, and I was able to take off with it. I mean, it took me about 3 or 4 months to get to that point, but once I was there, I was able to fly. Because I had that feeling that knitting was something I could do and that I should be doing. And I still have that feeling that pointe shoes are something I should be able to do, but I can't do it. And I think I finally figured out why. And I know this is just like the wrong audience to be jabbering about my ballet failure, but it's amazing how many things are so interconnected, because while I'm knitting, I'm watching YouTube. And I stumbled upon this lady who owns a pointe company, a pointe shoe company. She used to dance. And what she does is she fits dancers for pointe shoes. And she doesn't just do like one brand. She does all the brands, and she helps people figure out what they need to do in their inside their pointe shoes, involving pads and spacers and lamb's wool, so that way they can have the most comfortable dancing experience. And I realized I was never properly fitted for pointe shoes, because I live in the Sacramento area, and literally the only place I know of that sells pointe shoes is Capezzio's. And they're a great brand, don't get me wrong. I love Capezzio's, and I'm a Capezzio girl all the way. But there's only so many pointe shoe styles that they have. And I would be personally fitted when I was there. I believe she's the owner, actually wound up taking a picture of one of my feet, well, both of my feet, because the first pair of ballet slippers that she tried on me that day fit me exactly how you want ballet slippers to fit. And I believe my feet are still up on the store fridge, assuming they're still in business. Who knows after 2020. But I remember one time this lady who was in one of my classes had brought her extremely old pair of pointe shoes. And they had an extreme taper, like they really came to a very small point in her box. Basically, pointe shoes aren't rounded, they're flat at the tip, but you can either have a box that goes straight down the sides of your feet like this, or you can have it kind of come around like this, or you can have it kind of tapered like this. And I have short feet because I think I started pointe not way too early, just a little bit too early. My feet are a little shorter than I think they should have been. But I'm not worried about that. But because of that, I also have what appears to be wide feet. But because I have wide feet and they really spread when I'm on the floor, when I'm flat, when I go up on pointe, they suck up and they become a lot thinner, kind of like this, compared to this. So what would happen is I would slide into my shoes, which is not good for being able to stay standing up in pointe shoes. And it made it so much more painful for the tips of my toes, which is why I would uber stuff the toes of my shoes, so that way I'd have the proper support when my feet sank into the pointe shoes. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to build some strength in my feet, because I haven't danced ballet in 6 years. I haven't done pointe in 14 years. I'd like to build strength up in my feet, ankles, and calves again, and maybe contact the lady I found on YouTube. And I know she does digital fittings, and see if I could get myself a digital fitting so that maybe I can find out what I actually need for my shoes to get actually kind of comfortable. And maybe, I'm never going to be a professional ballerina. I knew that when I was a senior in high school, and I just never, I'm a professional hobbyist with it, but I always knew I could do better on toe in pointe shoes than I could. And I want to see if I can actually get good at that. Because when there's something that's in your heart that you should be able to do, and you can't, there's usually some barrier in your way that you're not realizing is there. And honestly, I think it was ill-fitting point shoes for me. So, I mean, I didn't really start this with an official message in mind, but I guess the moral of the story is that when you know that you can do something, you actually can. You just got to figure out what's in your way so that way you can overcome that challenge. And I know that if you know you can knit, and I know that if you know you can crochet, I know you actually can. Just keep trying and figure out what you need to change in order to make it work. I have faith. Anyway, I hope this helped you. It's definitely been cathartic for me. Happy crafting. Bye.